Hey, what is up? Welcome to this Mindset and Motivation Monday episode of the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast. As always, I'm your host, Brian Lofermento, and I am so excited about today's episode because I'm going to be sharing, it might just be the simplest advice that I've ever heard, and it's such a cliche. It's so basic, but it comes from someone who I really respect and who I really admire her work, her career, her perspective on the world, and I'm really excited about sharing this one with you, especially with Q4 right around the corner. So without further ado, let's dive into this episode. All right, so if you have been listening to the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast for years, not just this year, not just the past few episodes, but for years, then there's something that you hopefully have picked up on by now about my tendencies, about the way that I operate my businesses and this podcast, and literally every single thing that I do, even life-wise, this is how I organize it. I organize everything in quarters. Quarters are so meaningful for me. Quarters, just 3 months of the calendar year. So we are approaching the end of Q3. What does that mean? It means that Q4 is, at the time of recording, it's like 2 weeks away. Q4 is here. 75% of 2021 is already in the books. It's history. There's nothing we can do to rewrite what we did this year. We can start writing the chapter or the part of the story that we really want to read in the next 3 months, in the next quarter. And the other beautiful thing about quarters is that 3 months is a lot of time. It's a ton of time to execute on things that you want to execute on. It's a ton of time to start changing things. It's a ton of time. I mean, you could pick up a new instrument in 3 months. You could learn a new language or at least become conversational in it in 3 months. You can do anything you want over the course of 3 months. So if you're sitting there thinking, Brian, 2021 has been a roller coaster for me. It has not been the year that I hoped for it to be. Well, the good news is, it's not over. You have 3 months to make it a memorable and incredible year that works in your favor, something that's going to set you up for success. I mean, here we are. It just popped up on my phone the other day. 5 years ago, I started the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast, almost to the day. I think it's like 5 years and 4 days ago. And what's crazy to me is the results of me starting the podcast 5 years ago, those didn't show up in September 2016. Those didn't show up in October 2016, November 2016, December 2016. That result, me launching this podcast, didn't inherently change anything for me back in 2016. But here we are 5 years later, and I can safely tell you that launching the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast completely changed my life, completely changed my businesses, completely changed everything about the way that I live. So this podcast has been absolutely key in my life, and it's something that I launched at the end of Q3 5 years ago, 2016, all those years ago. I hadn't even moved to Los Angeles at that point. I hadn't even swapped coasts again to come over to Florida this year. So much has changed in the past 5 years, but those seeds were really planted this September 5 years ago. So quarters are very meaningful to me. They are a natural progression. The calendar flipping, a lot of people make fun of, why'd you wait until the 1st of January to make New Year's resolutions, to say you want to go to the gym? Why didn't you start on October 14th? Well, the reason is because it is naturally a moment of introspection. Time is a natural thing to reflect on and make changes for. And that's why I want to bring to you what's at the crux of today's episode, this Mindset and Motivation Monday episode, which I promised you in the pre-roll that this is the most basic advice. So shout out to a former client of mine and a good friend of mine, Jake Carger. She is an incredible HR consultant, and way more than that. Jake knows so much about life. She's had incredible life experiences. She's super accomplished, but even more than that, Jake is just an incredible human being. We share a birthday. We're both from Boston. We are maybe a decade or potentially more than that apart in ages, but that doesn't matter because Jake and I really relate on so many different levels. And one thing that Jake always used to write in her emails, we exchange emails a lot over the years, but Jake always put in her emails, she said, if nothing changes, then nothing changes. And ever since, this is probably 2017 that Jake and I met. So we've known each other for about 4 years now. And ever since 2017, it's such a cliche. It's such a basic phrase. Jake didn't come up with it, but it's so profound. And the fact that she said it so frequently and continues to say it so frequently is something that really set into my mind. The things that we hear most frequently, the things that we pay attention to most frequently, those are the things that start shaping our lives, which is why every single Monday I read through my entire list of guiding principles. Those guiding principles wouldn't do anything for me if I wrote them down in a notebook and then didn't read them for years. I read them every single Monday. And this basic, profound statement, this basic piece of advice is one of those things that I always come back to and I always reflect upon, which is if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Why am I talking to you about that here today? Well, again, if you've listened to this podcast for years now, then you know that every year, come Q4, I turn up the thermostat. I turn up the heat and I tell you, time is of the essence. Now is the time to make of this year what you want to. Forget what you did, forget what you didn't do through the first 3 quarters of this year. None of that matters at this point. What matters is what you're going to do over the next 3 months. And there's so many things, and obviously in the coming Strategy Wednesday episodes and Featured Friday episodes, I will be sharing with you some Q4 ideas, some Q4 plans, some Q4 strategies that you can use for your business. But today, as this Mindset and Motivation Monday episode, what I really want to focus on is what's going to change? Because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. That's why it's so simple, but so profound. Because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. If you don't like what happened in the first 3 quarters of this year, then today, you listening to this episode, sit down and ask yourself, what has to change? And this is a very deep and honest conversation that you have to have with yourself. You have to decide what's going to change. Because if you don't change something, you're going to keep getting the same results that you've been getting. If you're happy with those results, awesome. But if you're not happy, you need to sit down. This is an imperative. You need to sit down and start asking yourself this question. What am I going to change? What's going to change? Knowing full well that if nothing changes, then nothing will change. You'll get the same results. What will change? It's a piercing question, and it's maybe one that a lot of us like to shy away from because it's a mechanism through which we have to accept accountability for our own results. It's a mechanism through which we have to face the facts that our results up to this point in this year are a product of what we've done or what we've not done. And that's why this question is so important. It is that personal accountability. It is the question of, gosh, what did I do or didn't do that needs to change for me to start changing the results that I get? And we avoid this question. We don't think about this question with the intention that it deserves. And as a result of that, nothing changes. So what happens? Month after month, quarter after quarter, year after year, we keep getting the same results. So whether it means the people in your life need to change, whether it means what you're doing career-wise needs to change, whether it means how you're treating your finances needs to change, whether it means how you are productive or not productive needs to change, your hobbies need to change, how you spend your free time needs to change, maybe you're going out too much, maybe you drink too much, whatever it is, whatever isn't serving you and isn't delivering the results that you want, that needs to change. Because if nothing changes, then nothing changes. Such a simple concept, but I promise you, doing this deep inner work, having this sort of intention is what's going to change the game for you. It's all about change. Q4 is coming up. And I'm not talking about the change that politicians always talk about. I am talking about changing your results by changing your actions. You can't get different outputs if you keep putting in the same inputs. So that's it for me in today's episode. I'm excited about all the episodes that are coming up as we close in on episode 250. What am I talking about? 450. So wherever it is that you listen to podcasts, make sure you pound that subscribe button because we are airing new episodes every Monday, Wednesday, Friday here on the Wantrepreneur to Entrepreneur podcast.